This is CNN Live, watching people's votes count.
And on the one hand, because of independent minyanim in certain cities, and Chabad envy in just about every city, it's really, really a threat to a lot of synagogues to figure out how to, quote, keep their members from going in either route. And I would say Chabad right now is the much larger challenge for people. And I think that those are some of the large forces which are impacting upon congregations. Let me tell you what my concern is. My concern is that as we look at the industry of journalism now, as we look at the industry of entertainment, when those industries began to collapse, it felt like they collapsed suddenly. But in retrospect now, we have the wisdom to see that there were forces out there for many years, but it was hard to recognize them because they were really new. There were a few organizations that saw them. Craigslist, Google, Amazon, and a few others. But most of us, or most of those people in those industries, didn't see the trends coming. So when they all converged, it felt like things collapsed suddenly. What happened in those industries, I don't have any data on this, but it feels like those kinds of forces are happening in the synagogue world right now, but we're so fixated, understandably, on just remaining solvent that I don't know if people see that there's really a tidal wave coming. And I hope I'm not being alarmist, and I hope I'm wrong, but I can't think of any reason why what's happened in other kinds of industries also should not affect us in the same way. Now, I'll go into specifics around education, but I thought I would stop here just to get some feedback and perhaps to be challenged, or if you'd like to elaborate on the broad landscape. I guess my audio stopped working. I don't hear anything.
No. We're fine. Somebody does indeed have a question. Sonia, you have a question.
I do. I was wondering if you see this lack of membership as pertaining to the JCC too, or do you see the JCC as kind of the emergent congregation where you can purchase things a la carte?
I'm not familiar enough with that world to know.
Okay.
And John or Steve, others, perhaps you can address that.
My understanding is that the JCC landscape today is quite variegated, that there are some JCCs that are doing very well, and that there are others that are also suffering for a variety of reasons, perhaps. They too have competition from health clubs, other types of cultural institutions. The impression that I get is that there is no uniformity, but rather a situation where from community to community, and even in some cases within communities from center to center, there can be quite different circumstances.
Thank you.
Meyer, you had a question?
Yeah, more of a statement. Talking to Chabad, I'm finding, I've been in 2 or 3 different communities in the last 5 years, that I would say ultra-Orthodox, I would say either Chabad or the yeshivish world who have funding from outside the city are able to offer all types of programming that come free of charge, that are bringing people to their centers and the synagogues and are being successful. And I'm finding people here in Dallas, for example, some of the rabbis of the temples and synagogues being very, very concerned and problematic. They feel like they're losing membership to the whether it's the Kollel type or the Chabad type.
Yeah, I think that's another dimension to it. It isn't just Chabad, but I think the expansion of the Kollel movement as well is another factor. And what you're hearing in Dallas, what you're seeing in Dallas, I'm seeing pretty much all over the country. The other factor that I forgot to mention is that the national infrastructures of the denominations right now are incredibly stressed. And I don't think that needs a lot of commentary, but that also is contributing to a sense of, I would say, demoralization on some level, but also I would say people have mixed feelings about denominations anyway. Sometimes they feel that their dollars really are important in terms of certain services, I would say, but they've become a distraction to synagogues on the local level, and many synagogues are vibrant on the local level. I think what John described about JCCs is true of synagogues. I will tell you, I'm on three rabbinic listservs, and this year's topic of conversation, already starting last year's with contract negotiations, was all about how much salary is being cut, how many people are being laid off, am I going to have a job myself next year? So, again, I mention that because all of these trends which I listed earlier were out there, and now the impact has been kind of magnified because of the economic climate that we're in. So I would describe the climate in synagogues right now as one of great concern and very often palpable anxiety. I'm really not usually such a downer. All is not lost and all is not doom and gloom, but we do seem to be at one of those transition points. Okay. So now let's take a look very briefly. I'm just going to run through some trends, and we can open it up, I hope, for discussion. On the education front, what are congregations right now thinking about? What engages their attention? We mentioned Chabad, and that's actually, one concern, both in terms of their, I don't know if they switched to complementals yet, but to their supplemental school programs, camping programs, preschool programs, family education programs. Something new that seems to be emerging is the privatization of B'nai Mitzvah education coming from the synagogue pipeline. I want to explain that a moment. We already know that simchas have been privatized, and we know that there's nothing new about tutors being hired to help kids, have a bar or a bat mitzvah. But what I've heard from a couple colleagues, I would say right now, more on the West Coast, and also in the South, is that families with young children will send their children to Hebrew school to learn how to decode Hebrew, may be very happy with the experience of Hebrew school, but as it gets closer to bar and bat mitzvah, they pull their kids out of Hebrew school, hire a private tutor, and then enable their children to spend less time having a bar mitzvah and more time on their privatized simcha.